had similar features. For some reason, he was overjoyed to see me. Way too happy.
She's still under, right? Awesome. We'll have you do the honors of helping yourself to her before the bonding ceremony. Don't mind if I do.
The men began to undress and straddle me, while the others left the room to get something to eat or drink. As soon as I knew they could no longer hear or see me, I threw the men onto the floor, using all of my strength, and without hesitation, I slammed myself into the window to my right. Thank goodness there was a blanket, so I had minimal cuts. When I freed myself from the blanket, I sprinted butt naked down the street, shouting and screaming for help. And the craziest thing happened. A police officer was already parked down the road, staking out the house I was being held at. The moment he saw me and the look on my face, he jumped out and threw me into his car to save me from further embarrassment. Before I knew it, the house, it was already surrounded. I watched him line up and cuff all three of them while being handed a blanket and scrubs to put on. All three of them, they looked at me with rage, and then the middle one, he smiled and winked at me, which made my skin crawl. After 2 whole days of figuring out who I was and arranging for me to get back to my parents, I was filled in on what had been going on. The 3 men were triplets and long-term members that were born into an organization or cult that would choose the perfect spouse for the brothers. To put it simply, each family they had a certain amount of boys or men, 2 or 3 usually, and these men, they would choose who they wanted to carry their seed. The chosen had to be fully developed before taken into the organization, so they would stalk and follow for as long as it took so that they could get what they wanted. When taken, of course, they would have their way with her, but once a year, the cult had a ceremony for newlyweds where they would tie the woman up naked to a statue of a humanoid goat head with all of the cult members, all men, drowning their prize in wine, alcohol, and inappropriate bodily fluids for 12 hours straight in a remote area that is impossible to find. The house I was at was being watched after the release of Jordan, who was already imprisoned for his affiliation with the organization. Apparently, they were suspicious of him when he talked about how he couldn't wait to get home because something special was waiting for him, and they had no idea that I had already been taken and stored in the house for 3 days before his interview upon release. He was the 16-year-old that had threatened my dad all those years ago. If it wasn't for my bravery, as they said, they would have never known that I was there and probably would have never found me if I hadn't have broken through the window. Because I was able to hear all of the information that the men were exchanging between them, I was able to provide a good amount of info to the police. Mostly the location of the ceremony that was taking place the next night. They saved 38 women and arrested 46 naked, disgusting men that night. I'm no hero, and I don't like to refer to myself as one, even though the officers there tried to convince me of such. I was just glad to have made sure that those women, they didn't have to live that way. Also, what had happened at my house was everyone fell asleep at 3 o'clock, and the men, they had injected drugs into all of them just prior to stealing away with me, and they kept me sedated for days before I was even capable of waking up. My parents, they were beside themselves, and Heidi told them everything from the time we were kids all the way up to that night. My father and I had a lot to talk about when I got home, but for the most part, I understood why he didn't tell me, and I should have said something sooner. All I can think is, thank God I'm home. But unfortunately, that isn't the end of my trouble. 2 years ago, one of the men, he was released on good behavior, and every once in a while, I'll see him, and I'll always get that same card on my birthday.
You are beautiful, and one day we will be reunited with love.
Since I don't have any real proof of him still following me or providing the cards, the police, they can't actually do anything. So I just keep looking over my shoulder, and I'm always on my toes. This just shouldn't be the way to live, and there's nothing I can do. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. And you know, this story reminded me of a time when I heard about these two thieves that went into a store and all they stole was a calendar. The funny thing is, you know what they got for it? 12 months. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their story for us all here, and I hope you're all doing well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about. Also, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about. Here. So some of you may have noticed already that this particular video, it's quite short. The reason for this guys is that unfortunately I received a copyright strike on my last video. I'm trying to get the matter resolved, and honestly I believe all the content I used is covered under fair use, but unfortunately it means that until I have the strike removed I have to post shorter videos. It really does suck, and once again, it highlights the faulty system here on YouTube at the moment, which results in people's channels, like mine, being held hostage because of someone's ignorance on fair use, or just bitterness towards a review or critique of a video. Like I said, I'm hoping to get it resolved quickly, and I have filed a copyright strike counterclaim, contacted YouTube, and I even tried contacting the person who filed the strike. But unfortunately, the person who filed the strike is not speaking to me as of yet, and YouTube usually takes their sweet ass time dealing with these things. So until then, I'll keep trying to bring you guys some videos. But please bear with me, and please continue to show your support by watching the videos, as I really need the support right now guys. Alright, I could go on, but each sentence is chewing into the time of this video, so I'll keep you all posted, but without further ado, let's begin. Number 2. It was 2001 and I was 9 years old. My family and I had only lived in our house for a couple of years. It was in the middle of the night, on a school night, about 3 or 4 in the morning. I woke up to a metal clinking sound. At first, it didn't register that I was actually hearing it, as I heard it in my dream too, and I was still half asleep. It was actually the rattling of the doorknob that eventually woke me up. At the time, I slept with my bedroom door open, so I could hear it clearly. From the way the house is situated, I can see out into the living room with direct sightlines to the television when I sit up in my bed. I sat up and looked out, listening intently and trying to determine what exactly it was I was hearing. The living room was decently lit with moonlight, since the curtains at the time were thin and white, though not sheer. I got up, hugging my teddy close to me, and slipped out into the hallway, peering just around the doorframe. It must have been a full moon, because it was light enough that I could see the leading around the individual panes of glass that created the window of the French-style back door. Only one part of the window was clearly shadowed though, like something or someone was on the other side. I got down on my hands and knees, bear tucked under my arm, and crawled up beside the sofa to peek over the arm. Then I moved another few feet to crouch behind the nearest chair, so I had a clearer view of the back door. At the time, the doors all still had their brass knobs, and the knob at the back door was broken and it wouldn't lock. My eyes widened as I watched the doorknob turn with increasing horror, and I scurried into my parents' room. This was a useless feat though, since my parents, they sleep like the dead. I went to my mum's side of the bed first and shook her. She only moaned a little and then rolled over. I went to my dad's side and then I shook him. He didn't stir at all. I went back to watch the door, slowly moving closer. My stomach somersaulted with fear as I saw the shadow on the other side of the curtain move. It was clearly a person, probably crouched since it was about my height. Now, I was close enough that I could reach over to the light switch by the door and turn on the backyard light. But there was a gap at the edge of the curtain, and I was scared that I would be seen. I tried to wake my parents a few more times, to no avail. I was near tears at this point and too scared to go back to my room. I got my blankets and laid down on the floor in my parents' room. I closed my eyes for what felt like only a second, but the next thing I knew, my mum's alarm clock, it went off, and she called out to me to wake up. My mum was surprised to find me there, and I told my parents about that night. My dad went and checked the door, but he said that the bolt was still locked. They attributed my story to my imagination, or even that I had dreamed it and sleepwalked into their room. I had no history of sleepwalking though, and I was upset that they didn't believe me. Even to this day, they are still skeptical when it comes up in conversation. And to this day, I check the doors and windows every night before I go to bed and fall asleep, listening for any sounds out of the ordinary. Needless to say, I've become a very light sleeper.
Number 1.
My story starts when I was just 9 years old. I lived in a home located in Wollongong, a city that's located 90 kilometres south of Sydney, which, if you didn't know, is Australia. I was just a typical kid at the time, breaking the law, ding-dong ditching houses, and getting into trouble at school. But nothing can shake the trouble that happened to me on this day. I broke into a stadium that had been abandoned for years due to not being funded by the government to complete its construction. It was mostly just a rusted steel frame, with mini demountables to the right, and a huge long grass field to the left. Now, this wasn't one of those round stadiums that you would see on a television. The field is where people are supposed to play football, and the construction was a grandstand with a building attached to it. I could only tell this because of the shape and the fact that there was still some concrete around. After I broke in, I decided that I would go and walk around the field. Upon exploring the field, I saw a lot of dirty and shredded clothing. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was sleeping in the long grass, I thought to myself. But what I did find, which still sends chills down my spine, was a big half-rusted axe. I was pretty young, but I was still old enough to think, what the fuck is an axe doing here? I shrugged off the feeling I had after my discovery and started chopping down some small trees for the fun of it. After getting bored, I checked out the grandstand. I could hear the tin roof rusting above me, and whilst watching my steps, I could see the junkie syringes below me. Honestly though, this place, it was really creepy. Part of me wanted to explore more, but the other half of me, it just wanted me to run as fast as I could out of that place. Foolishly, I decided to not follow my gut feeling. I went to the demountables, and I can't remember how, but I managed to get into one of them. But I heard something that makes me regret going there, even to this day. I heard a man with a really groggy voice simply mutter,
Hi.
It hit me faster than a bullet, enough to run as fast as I fucking could out of there. I heard running footsteps, followed by a crash, and then some swearing. I had time to run out and to see what he looked like. A man who must have been in his mid-50s. He had black, long, ratty hair, along with a black, ratty beard. It turned out that the man, he fell into where the elevator was supposed to be. He had one of the most furious looks on his face that I'd ever seen in my lifetime. After I was roughly 200 meters away from there, I looked back. The man, he was on top of the grandstand, just watching me run. Weeks or months later even, I saw the same man running through a field, and I've never seen him since. To this day, his face, it still haunts me for some reason. He was so angry on that day. 7 years later, and I'm almost 16, I decided to go for a shortcut through some creeks. The creeks go past the stadium, which they were able to start and finish the construction already by then. But when I went through the creeks and what I saw, it scared me shitless. It was a pile of clothes, the same clothes that the man had from 7 years ago. I also went through the creek 2 days ago when I saw them again, but they'd been moved. I'm never going back to that creek ever again. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. And you know, I was thinking about making a soccer pun based on that stadium reference because you guys just know I'm a sucker for puns. And I guess you could say, I just achieved my goal. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their story for us all here, and I hope you're all doing well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent, just so that I can be above board with everything. And also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please change any names if you don't want particular. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, 2016 is almost here guys, and as always I'll be here bringing you guys scary stories and creepy countdowns and all that good stuff for next year. But before this video starts, I just wanted to throw something at you guys to consider. Something I've noticed is that many of the scary story channels and countdown channels, etc., they kind of sort of lack an individual character to them. And what I mean by this is that many of the channels, the content creator of that channel, they don't really do too much personal interaction with the people that support them. And I don't really know why this is, but something I've never wanted for my channel in particular is for it to become this kind of soulless machine where I guess I just kind of pump out videos each week, and where we don't get to kind of interact, and where you guys don't get to know me and I don't get to know what's going on with you guys, and you know, it just kind of is this soulless kind of dead channel where, you know, people just come and watch things for information, you know. I guess I've just never really wanted that. So one of the goals next year for me is, I guess I want to try and connect with you guys a little bit more, and I thought maybe doing some more vlogging and I guess just showcasing some of my life a little bit more would be a cool idea. And I guess I'm doing this primarily because I'm beginning to understand that heaps of you guys are not just here because of the content I create, but also because of me. Heaps of you guys really support me and want to get to know who I am, and you know, to be honest with you, I want to get to know you guys too. And originally I created another channel where I was going to do some gaming videos and some vlogging stuff, and I guess I could continue to contribute to the channel. Whether you submitted stories, provided suggestions, gave encouraging or critical feedback, or just watched a video, all of you have been such a major support to me this year, and it's incredible, honestly incredible, to see how far the Hive has grown in just 6 months, guys. It's crazy. And listening to some of my old content has really helped me to see just how much I've improved over this time. And honestly guys, so much of that is thanks to all of you. I have never been so happy to be doing something, and I've loved every moment of interacting with all of you. It's such an awesome, diverse and rich community here, and I receive messages from people all over the world asking me to never stop making videos, and that they spend every day just waiting for the next video I make. And people are messaging me saying that my videos help them to sleep, or help them to cope with things, or you know, just help them to get through life because they don't feel so alone, because bad things happen to everyone. So you know, I'm just so humbled and appreciative that my channel has become this, and that, you know, you guys are the community that are making this. And yeah, I'll never take it for granted, and it's because of all of you guys sharing the videos with your friends, liking the videos, watching the videos, and all of the support that you guys just throw behind me personally and the channel, that we've come so far. And honestly, I would never have come so far without all of you guys. Whether you began watching mid-2015 when I first began, or you just joined over the past few weeks. I mean, each of you are such a huge encouragement and support to me, and I don't know if all of you watched my 100k video, but that video really outlined at the beginning how life was for me over the past few years. It's been really tough, I'll be honest with you guys, it's been really hard. But because of all of you, I now wake up every morning with a huge smile on my face. I feel so incredibly happy and blessed because of all of you. And I've just loved getting to know so many of you guys this year, whether through email, Facebook, Twitter, or just regular comments through the comment section here on YouTube. You guys are honestly changing my life, and for that, guys, I'm so grateful. Thank you all so much for an incredible 2015, guys. I hope 2016 is even better as well. And you know what? With you guys around, I have no doubt that it will be. You guys are just so awesome, and I just can't thank you enough for the difference that you're making in my life, my family's life, and yeah, I don't know what else to say, but just thank you guys so much. Yeah, so just so you guys know, I'll be taking a few days off to be with family and friends over Christmas. But all of you guys, please stay safe out there, and look after one another. And I'll be here after the little few days of just taking a bit of a rest and kicking back and eating some good food and just taking some time out just to rejuvenate after an incredibly busy and awesome year. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. It's a doozy. It's really long. It's the top ones for the subscribers of this year, their stories. So yeah, there ain't no pictures, there ain't no sound effects. It's all raw. It's just something for you guys to kick back to, play video games, listen to at night in bed, or just whatever you guys do to relax. This is just something that can accompany you and help you guys to relax even more and just kick back and listen and enjoy. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and thanks again for an amazing 2015. And without further ado, let's begin. The dreaded family vacation. Up to a certain age, there is a comfort, and excitement even, about being cooped up with your nearest and dearest in a tin can on wheels for a week or two at a time. But once you reach the age of independent thinking, those family camping trips can seem more like punishment for some unknown crime. In my case, I made this realization about the age of 12. Unfortunately, this was too young to make a case for staying home while the rest of the folks went traipsing up and down the East Coast, hitting all the historical landmarks worth seeing, and a whole lot more of them that just should have been left out of the Rand McNally Atlas. That was how we found our way before Google and GPS. Some trips, however, did not take us too far from home, and these were more tolerable, mainly because the shorter distance somehow meant we had more room for stuff. I still can't reconcile that math, but it meant that I could take my bike with me, and that meant that I could escape the campsite and get off by myself.
Number 3.
I'm a girl, and I was 16 at the time. I live with my mother and my brother. My grandmother had visited earlier that day, driving her car round to our place. It had begun to get dark, and she was not confident driving it back in the low light, and so my brother took her home. However, late that evening, my gran had asked if my mother could drop the car back at her place, as she needed to use it the next day. My grandmother lives only a block away, and so the trip wouldn't have taken more than 5 minutes. The best way to go about making the delivery was that my mother would drive my grandmother's car and my brother would drive behind her, so that they could drive back together. And so off they went, leaving me alone in the house for a brief time. This didn't bother me, as I was old enough to be fine on my own. But this is where things took a terrifying turn, and the dread and fear that filled every inch of my being that night is far worse than any negative feeling I've ever had the misfortune of experiencing since. This is going to be difficult to recount once again. I was sitting in my front living room. We have a small front garden and a security gate surrounding the premises. This is the standard property arrangement for the country in which I live, as we have high crime rates. I heard a rattling of the front gate outside, and naturally, I went to check out the window to see if perhaps my mother and brother had returned. To my absolute terror though, I watched as two dark figures jumped over my gate and then entered into my property. Adrenaline immediately kicked in, and in a fluster, I ran to the phone and dialed my mother's cell phone number. My heart sank as I heard her cell phone ringing in the next room. I couldn't waste any time, and I rushed to dial my brother's cell phone number, only to discover, in shock, that he too had left his phone at home. I was now completely panicking, and ran to the front door in search of at least one of the two sets of house keys so that I could turn the garden beams on. It's a motion sensor security system, and it's triggered by movement, and it sets the alarm off with an extremely loud siren and alerts the local security company. I couldn't find either set, and would later find out that my brother and mother, they'd each taken a set, but neither of them had turned the beams on after they left. At this stage, I was really freaking out, and I felt that I didn't have enough time to search for the local police department's number, nor did I have the security company we were protected by's number. I felt utterly helpless. Not a minute or two later, my mother and brother arrived home. They parked and exited the car, and then they made their way to the front door, all the while being completely oblivious to the fact that the two intruders, they were waiting around the side of the house, concealed in the darkness. As my mother and brother entered, I screamed that someone was on the property and that I didn't know where they had gone to, running to the back door to check the backyard. It seemed to me that my mother and brother, they just stood there, unable to process what exactly it was that I was saying, leaving the door and security gate open behind them. As I turned from searching out the back, I heard my brother yelling out the front door for whoever it was to fuck off and get the fuck off of our property. I ran over to the fireplace to grab the poker. It was always in the back of my mind that if something like this ever were to happen, the fire poker would be an easily accessible weapon to use. After this, I ran to the front to join my family as we attempted to hold the door barricaded while we tried to lock it, as two men tried to force their way into my home. It was too late to lock the gate at this point, but we managed to get the chain latched on the door, but with the two men pressing their weight against it, the chain was taut, and one of the men reached their hand into the gap and the chain gave way too. I felt sick to my stomach to realize that I had not grabbed the fire poker, but instead the fireplace brush. It was an utterly stupid mistake, but with all the commotion, I wasn't being careful enough. Now that I look back on it, we may have been able to protect ourselves to some degree with the fire poker, but if the men were ultimately in anyway, they could have essentially pried it off of us and used it against us. After a few seconds of struggle, the chain broke and our safe haven, it was invaded. As these fuckers barged in, my mum instinctively pressed the emergency panic button by the front door, something I would have done had I not been under the impression that those panic buttons had been broken for several years. The men, they both had guns, and as the first man who had entered realized what my mother had just done, he hit her over the head with the back of his gun. The three of us were then pushed down onto the ground and held at gunpoint by one of the men, while the other one went around the house, taking valuables which included my mother's laptop, hard drive, cell phone, and any money and bank cards we had. The men must have known that they were running out of time, as they didn't go through the entire house, leaving most of our things with us. However, they took my mum's laptop and hard drive, which was devastating, as my mother runs her own company from home, and everything on the electronics was business related and incredibly valuable information. While that man was gathering the items that he could, The other, that was holding us grounded, proceeded to shout at us, kicking at my brother in the face and verbally threatening our lives, as if staring down the barrel of his gun was not enough torment. Somewhere within all of the commotion, I managed to get hold of one of the sets of house keys, and I pressed the panic button on the remote, as well as putting the beams on in preparation for the men's departure, as this would also set off the alarm. When the other accomplice returned, they proceeded to tell my mother to give them car keys, which she did. They also took the other set of house keys. We were then ushered outside, and I was walked from the front door to the garden, which tripped the beams and set the alarm off. The alarm siren, it was now going off, and the men realized that they had to get out of there or they would be caught, and so they fled. They left the car as they didn't have time to take it, and they jumped back over the gate just as they had done before, and then it was over. I stood in the front garden, clutching myself in the embrace of my mother, in shock as the words of one of the men echoed through my head. When I was separated from my brother and my mother outside, I had one of the men point his gun at me, and he told me to get into the car and that they were going to take me from my mother with them. They were going to take me with them. They were going to kidnap me. However, as my mother saw the man raising his gun to me, she ran in front of me in my defense, which is why I wound up in her arms. She did not hear what he said to me though. A few minutes later, the security company, they arrived, followed by the police and an ambulance. The hours that followed were filled with statements being taken, my mother being taken to the hospital for an open gash in her scalp, and arrangements being made for where we would be staying until the house had been cleared. The events that night were incredibly traumatic, but things could have been a lot worse. People need to be very vigilant. Complacency is extremely dangerous.
Number 2.
When I was young, I was always scared of the dark, and I'd freak out and cry if the power went off. I hated it to the point that I would use nightlights or keep the light in the bedroom on, even now as a 26-year-old woman. No one could ever really understand, but since I have the terrible gift of seeing things that cannot normally be seen, I was petrified. Even going out late at night, I will walk in the middle of the street, scared of what could be under the parked cars or watching me from the bushes. When I was younger, about 17 years old, my worst fear, it happened. I knew I shouldn't have gone out in the backyard. I knew it, but I still had to. Tomorrow was garbage day, and of course, because I'm lazy and procrastinate, I had to take out 3 bins of garbage at 3 in the morning. My parents were out of town, like so many other times when shit went down, but I'll share those another time. The bins, unfortunately, they had no wheels, and they had to be carried from the back of the house, around the side where the gate was, and be put on the curb. I kept the dogs inside, worried that they might run off, and I put on the outside light on the garage and the house. I loved those lights because it would come on when someone walked by, and it both scared and relieved me. So, I took the first bin, getting that nauseous, scared feeling in the deep pit of my gut. But I pressed on, walking past my old kitchen set from when I was a child, and an old pizza box that was still closed. I put the garbage bin on the curb, and then I walked back. Now, when you walk around the side of the house from the back to the side, the light will go off when you turn around the corner, and when you walk back, it'll come on when you walk up onto the deck or close the garage. The second time I went, I still felt scared, quickly looking at all the dark corners and crevices where someone could be hiding, and quickly grabbing the second bin. I put it on the curb and I walked back before grabbing the third. By this time, my whole body was telling me to run. Just go, get away. But I stupidly grabbed the bin and walked to the side of the house. From the corner of my eye, I watched the light go out as it normally did. But then, it turned back on within one step, and the kitchen playset, it fell over behind me. My eyes widened and my heart jumped into my throat as I turned around. What I saw was a simple black shadow from behind the corner, on the grass, stretching over the lawn. Its limbs, they were thin. There was no hair or any hint of clothing. Well, that's all I had to see before I turned around and ran towards the open gate, still carrying the garbage can like an idiot. As soon as I stepped out of the gate, it slammed behind me. It was leaning against the fence and literally slammed behind me with the force of nothing I'd ever seen before. That night, there was no wind, and the cool air stayed perfectly still. How it slammed shut, I'll never know. But as soon as I realized, I threw the bin and ran to the curb. I watched, wide-eyed, as the blackness behind the fence and gate just loomed against it. There was shuffling, and what I knew as the pizza box, it was being pushed around on the cement walkway. Something was there. It was right there, looking at me, concealed by the dark. I watched it, praying that the grey fingers would not push through the gaps, repeating in my head, "I'm not ready to go. I'm really not ready to go." As I backed up across the street, I watched it for 30 minutes, in complete silence. After the movement stopped, I took my phone and called my boyfriend at the time to come to my house because there was an intruder. Thankfully, he tiredly got up and then he drove to my house. It felt like forever as I just stood there shaking and crying quietly. He finally drove up the driveway, and once he was inside, I felt a bit of relief, until he said that he was going to the backyard. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to leave him alone either. So I slowly followed in after him, and I noticed that the pizza box, it had been opened and moved from its prior place. We turned the corner, and I looked and pointed at where I saw the shadow of the thin body, and then I looked down at the fallen kitty refrigerator, laying face down on the cement. I was terrified. I felt like I was going insane, as my boyfriend laughed it off as my wild imagination. I knew what it was, but he didn't listen. He refused what I thought it was. But that wasn't the first time anything like that happened. It was just another night in my hellhole of a life.
Number 1.
My name is Gary Valentine. I'm currently married to Margaret Valentine, and this story is very important to me. We live in Clearfield, PA. I work at the local oil refinery, and my wife, she's unemployed. We live a couple of miles away in a town called Lasonta Mills. We live in a 4-bed, 3-bath house in the most residential area of Lasonta Mills. Even though we live here in Lasonta Mills, most of our amenities, they're in Clearfield. Here's my story. It was not far from Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and Margaret and I, we were freshening up the house. Margaret was dusting and I was vacuuming the kitchen when I heard a small thud coming from outside. It was Sunday night, and I thought to myself, if someone was going to break in, they'd have to be pretty stupid because it was winter here in PA and a Sunday night. Margaret did not look like she heard the noise either, so I just went back to vacuuming. I watched the TV and then I went to bed towards 11 o'clock. I woke up at 7 to my loud alarm clock. I got up, made myself some Cheerios, got ready, and then I went to the refinery. I came home at about 6:30. We had some fried chicken with mashed potatoes and then brushed our teeth. But while I was doing this, the thought of that thud, it came into my mind for some reason. I questioned it in my mind, and then I went to bed with Margaret. I dozed off into a deep sleep when, at 2:30, I was woken up by the same thud I heard last night. I curled into a ball, and then I heard a fist bang onto the front door. Margaret woke up too, huddled up in the covers with fear. We then heard a moan, and then we heard footsteps walk away from the house. We sat there wondering if we should call 911, though Margaret said that we should just go back to sleep. I wondered what the hell it was. I thought to myself,
It must have happened, because Margaret heard it too.
I did not get any rest that night. The next day, I went to work exhausted. But when I walked to my car, my heart sank. It was 2 footsteps in a pile of mud from a rainstorm a couple of nights ago. There really was someone at our house last night. This was freaky as hell. I went to work and told a coworker, Frank, about the story. He first didn't believe me, but I called Margaret and she told him the same thing. Frank sighed and said,
If I were you, I'd stay at a hotel for a couple of nights or something.
I told him no, and that I was going to show this person that this person's little trick, it wasn't working. Frank patted my back and then said,
All right, that's some real courage there.
I smiled and then I went back to work.
This creeper, he's a real idiot,
I repeated in my head on the car ride home. When I came home, Margaret, she was frozen in fear. I asked,
Is everything all right?
She sputtered,
No, that weird freak, he called and said he would slit our throats.
After that call, I grabbed some steak knives and I put one at each of our nightstands. I contacted the authorities too, and they said that they would send down an officer to examine the footprints. After 45 minutes, an officer came down and examined everything. He said that the footprints were human, but he said it was probably one of us. Margaret informed him about the sounds too. He said it was probably just house noises. He left and he did nothing. That night, we were just too shook up to go to bed. At 1 o'clock in the morning, we heard a huge bang at the front door. We jumped immediately. Then we heard an even bigger bang at the back door. This creep was in our backyard. Then the creeper yelled,
I'll slit your wrists, Gary and Margaret.
We nearly screamed, but we covered each other's mouths. This creep, he knew our names. We then proceeded to hide under the bed, but the man, he kicked our backyard door. Then the freak said,
If you don't let me in, I'll break into your bedroom window, and then I'll cut your heads off.
This freak was now screaming, and he knew where the hell we were. We grabbed our knives, and then I said something I regret.
Get off our damn lawn, or else I'll come out there and stab you myself in the face, you freak.
He stopped talking for some time, and then he said that he would be back. I tried to call 911, but that freak, he'd wreaked havoc on the power box. An officer came at 1:30 though, due to a neighbor calling, and what we saw freaked us out. The back door, it now had 4 glass panels wedged into the middle of the door, and there was a huge crack right down the center. The officer made some phone calls, after which he stated that all the local hotels, they were all booked out. So we decided to stay, which I really regret. We managed to get some sleep, and it was now time to work at the refinery. I told Frank the story, and of course, he was in shock. But he said that currently, he had a family living in his place, so we couldn't stay at his place. Confused as to what to do next, I stopped for gas on the way home. The man at the counter, he said that I looked like crap, and honestly, I felt like it. But I told the man to shut up, and I walked away from the gas station into my car. That man, he had no idea what I was going through. Margaret and I, we just couldn't go to bed, but we needed to get some rest, so we tried to get to sleep. At 2 o'clock, we heard 3 extremely loud bangs at the front door. Margaret and I, we instantly knew who it was. It was that same guy, though we didn't speak. We then hear 2 more softer bangs at the front door. Then we heard what sounded like someone kicking at the front door. At that very moment, I regretted not going to a hotel, even if it did mean having to pack up and move somewhere. I also thought to myself,
How the hell would all local hotels be booked?
this guy then moved to our bedroom window and was cussing at us, telling us to burn in hell. Then, after about 20 attempts, he finally broke down the door. We grabbed our knives and tiptoed to the master bedroom. We heard glass being smashed from the kitchen. This freak was in our kitchen, and he was destroying it. Then, all of a sudden, he left screaming.
Tomorrow, Gary and Margaret, you're going to die.
We heard more glass being smashed, and then a door opening, and then he left. We huddled in the bathroom together with the door locked, and eventually we drifted off. We woke up, and obviously I was not attending work that day. We went downstairs, and we saw that the whole kitchen, it had been destroyed, and there was glass all over the place. We went to my Aunt Sarah's house in Clearfield, and we talked about the situation. She said to stay with her, so we nodded our heads and we said thanks. We went to bed at 8:30 that night while Sarah stayed up. It was totally peaceful. That is, until 3 o'clock. We were woken up again by 5 loud bangs. Margaret and I, our hearts skipped a beat. That psycho was at Aunt Sarah's house. This time, he broke down the door fairly quickly. Sarah went down, and then we heard Sarah scream, the most awful scream we'd ever heard. We heard a chainsaw, and then footsteps coming up the stairs. We had brought a knife each into the room, and we held them high. We heard the man say,
Time to die.
The door creaked open, and what we saw was a man, probably 6 feet, with black hair, dark brown eyes, and a chainsaw. He leaped into the air while swinging the chainsaw, though he missed. Then he grabbed Margaret's right arm and said,
Bye.
Though, at that moment, Margaret managed to punch this guy in the nose, and then she shoved him to the ground. She was about to stab him when he kicked her in the right leg, which made her fall down. He was about to kill her with that chainsaw when I stabbed him in the back. He turned his head and tried to take a swing at me, though I stabbed him in the arm. He kicked me and punched me in the nose twice when I stabbed him in the stomach, and then in the left leg. He dropped to the floor after this, and by this time, he was nearly half dead. I grabbed his chainsaw and then I punched him. He then sat there rolling in a pool of blood, cussing at us for about 5 minutes before Margaret, she punched him in the face again. Margaret went to the neighbours and called 911. The cops and the ambulance came, and he was taken into custody. Unbelievably, on the way out, he managed to say that he hoped that we died. He was taken away, and a week later, I heard some pretty scary news. He had apparently hacked into my Facebook account, and he had found my address. This man was apparently jealous of my happy lifestyle, and he just got out of jail for burglary. So, apparently, he wanted us to die. I know, it doesn't make much sense, but that was what I was told. Apparently, he had been scoping out my house, and then, on Sunday, he made a thud on the wall just to scare us. He wanted us to be sad and scared before we were killed. So, for 4 nights, he tried scaring us, before, on Friday, making his move. He followed us on that Friday, and when he broke in, Sarah tried to stop him, though he killed her, and then he tried to murder us too. The story is disgusting when I look back at it. That same year, we moved to Manhattan Beach, California, and we had 2 boys. We now live in a 4-bed, 3-bath house, and we live happily, though Margaret and I, we still have nightmares. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. And you know, I once heard this story about a female criminal that reminded me of this video. This nut, her name was Hazel, and she held up a bank. And you know what this nut said to the bank tellers? Give me all the cash yous have. Go on now, don't lie, you guys love this stuff. You guys eat this stuff up for breakfast, right? Don't worry guys, I'm not going to quit my day job or anything, okay? I won't do stand up or anything, I promise. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their story for us all here. And I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. Also, remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates throughout the week. You can also catch me on my second gaming channel, all of which have links in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in guys, and for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one. Sometimes, it's the people you care about who frighten you the most, and the more you care, the more frightening they can become. I was born and raised on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, and am a man of Japanese ancestry. From 2008 to 2011, I was enrolled in private Hawaiian college. One of its instructors, Professor Rothbard, I had known since 1997. He was a major reason why I chose to invest these years in this particular institution of learning. This man served as the academic advisor to two school-sponsored clubs. One was where students held roundtable discussions on philosophy, politics, and current events. I was the president of this group. Rothbard was also the advisor to PHC's chapter of Enactus. Many universities have an Enactus chapter or team. Each Enactus chapter performs a project, and at the closing of the school year, an Enactus team from each state travels to US mainland in order to present the projects to executives from major corporations, who then serve as judges. During the incidents I shall describe, Enactus went by another moniker, SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise. Professor Rothbard urged his students to attend the meetings of our philosophy club, and in September of 2009, one of those students of his showed up.
Trevor, you'll love this one,
he announced as he beamed at me. Her name was Inga Johansson. She was reared in Tromsø, Norway, yet her father was an expatriate from Minnesota, and though in her 20s, she happened to be several years older than most of our private Hawaiian college classmates. At the height of 6 feet and 1 inch, she loomed over my 5 foot, 8 inch body. She informed us that she was a finalist in a nationwide modelling competition back in Norway in 2005, and for anyone who glanced at this blonde, it was not difficult to believe. One of the attributes that jumped out at everyone most quickly was that Inga, she spoke authoritatively. Some young women, they tend to talk as if they're tentative in everything that they say. Even when they staunchly declare something, they sound like they might be asking a question. On the converse, everything that leaves Inga's mouth in public comes in the form of a firm assertion, even if she is unsure on the matter and interrogating others. On the day we met, as we would learn was her tendency, Inga dressed herself in conservative, casual attire. Although I would learn she sported a closet full of colourful clothes, being in black and white was her favourite. In spite of some pretenses at habitual formality, Inga's body language was not too uptight. She seemed very together and bold, also subtly flirtatious. I remember the first joke that she told me, which was at one of our philosophy meetings. She said that out of every signature she spotted on web forums, her favourite remained the internet, where men are men, women are men, and children are undercover FBI agents, alluding to FBI agents posing as children in chat rooms to root out child predators. I didn't find that funny, but Inga certainly did. She giggled to herself as she recited it. Because Inga shared in my love for Professor Rothbard, she decided to partake in a second course of his, this one going from January to May 2010. By February of that year, Inga and I had become very close. Professor Rothbard treasured her company as well. He invited us to dinner at his home, where Inga gushed to him, "I think of you as my second father." And he replied,
I think of you as my second daughter.
on that topic of her outward confidence, Inga proffered that she obsesses about climbing into positions of authority and responsibility. It is, she whispered with some uncharacteristic shyness, so that people won't notice that she feels the opposite of reliable and sane. If people saw her as successful on the outside, they would assume everything was fine on the inside. I assured her, "It's very normal for people to want to be seen as responsible, and for them to nurture private doubts about themselves too." She also volunteered a rather strange explanation about her name. She always had the last name of her mother, Lilith Johansson, and not her father. As she articulated, her father went by Matt Pennington, but that was not his birth name. He was born Matt Hockinen to Walt and Dorothy Hockinen. Upon discovering that Walt Hockinen was not his biological father, stated Inga, Matt changed his name to Pennington, his mother's maiden name. As for the man's reason for moving to Tromsø, Inga continued, it was because he was disgusted by the US military intervention in Vietnam. The USA was a place where he didn't want to be anymore. Throughout this telling, Inga kept a huge smile, as if there was nothing particularly painful or difficult about what her father must have gone through. That same February, Inga came to Professor Rothbard and I in tears, whereupon she unloaded on us a distressing incident regarding a classmate of hers, a classmate who sat near her during Professor Rothbard's lectures. This was Seo Thanesign from the nation of Myanmar. As Inga told the tale, she and Seo went to a bar late at night to acquaint themselves with one another. There, Seo regaled her with some stories. She feigned approval, but secretly she found them creepy. First, Seo boasted about being a tremendous womanizer, providing a litany of various conquests. Secondly, he waxed zealously of his exploits for the Burmese military, claiming to have tortured enemy soldiers. Later that night, she continued, Seo walked her to the front of her apartment building in Waikiki, and they exchanged their goodbyes. A few minutes later, she received a call from Seo on her iPhone, where Seo announced to her,
I accidentally locked myself out of my residence. Can I crash on your couch for the night?
Seo's various escapades of bedding college women fresh in her mind, Inga demanded to know if his calling her was some pretext for getting into her apartment so that he could solicit sex from her. According to Inga, Seo chuckled and replied something to the effect of,
No, honestly, I really did lock myself out of my home. It was an accident. But if we end up fucking, that wouldn't be bad either, right?
Inga told us that she consequently panicked and yelled, I don't have a couch. Seo got angry and they had a heated argument, but eventually Seo gave up. Still though, Inga told Professor Rothbard and I, because of what he said about women and because of his war stories, I was afraid he wanted to rape me. Thereupon, she whispered that a few minutes subsequent to the argument, she drifted into sleep and dreamt that she awoke to Seo cupping his hand over her mouth to muffle her screams, his other hand gripping a blade. Tears bubbling from her eyes before me, Inga said that, in the dream, Seo ravished her, and she complied with what he wanted rather than struggle against him. Through her tears, she whimpered,
want to believe that in real life, I'd fight back and risk dying, as opposed to giving in.
Professor Rothbard and I did our best to console her. I suggested that she go to the security team of her apartment building, describe Sayo to the team, and ask that they keep on the lookout for him. In that particular course, Professor Rothbard was teaching to Inga and Sayo. Rothbard had planned that the students be bunched together in groups of 4. The teams would then compete in formal debates for that class. Inga requested to the professor that because of the incident with Sayo, he ensure that she not be placed in the same team with Sayo. Normally, Professor Rothbard would not comply with such a request, but because of the gravity of the charge against Sayo, Professor Rothbard let it slip. Inga filed no formal complaints to the school, and she sternly insisted that neither of us report the incident to campus officials or the police. I reluctantly yield to this command. A week later, Inga approached Professor Rothbard and myself, and she proclaimed that Sayo vindicated her wariness of him. She told us that he followed up by approaching her and then hissing,
"If you tell anyone what happened on that night, I'll kill you."
Inga said that Sayo then smiled and then broke out into a menacing cackle. It was clear that he meant this. She was now more afraid of him than ever, and I felt particularly protective of Inga. She wanted us to defend her violently if it ever came to that. As the spring went on, Inga periodically bored me with overeager and nauseating reminiscing about her ex-boyfriends back in Tromsø, such as Franz from Austria. She cooed,
"You're really kind and sweet, and you care about me. Just like Franz."
She then turned from me and stared into nothing, wistfully. She weirdly then put the tip of her pinky between the outermost edges of her lips. In spite of her usually carrying herself with grown-up deportment, she often took on the body language of a 4-year-old child, such as in this instance. She giggled and said girlishly,
"Franz always joked that he was a pedophile."
I wanted to snap. I wanted to tell her that that was sleazy and I don't appreciate being compared to someone like that. But instead, I didn't say anything. I just gaped, confused as to why Inga would want me to hear any of this. On another night, as we were about to leave her apartment for our date together, she blurted, out of nowhere,
"Why do people always get hysterical when they learn that they have a child molester in the neighborhood?"
My eyes bulged out and I stammered.
"What? What do you mean?"
She elaborated.
"Society is so bigoted against child molesters. If an 8-year-old girl has sex with an adult, the community should give consideration to the possibility that she consented to it."
Inga maintained that a prepubescent child should be deemed legally competent to agree to sexual relations with a grown-up caregiver. No protesting could sway her on this either. On yet another one of my visits to her apartment, she elucidated on her general fear of men. When she was 13 years old, her best friend, also 13, forced himself on her, reaching into her shirt through her collar and kneading her breasts. Then, on about 6 occasions, he begged her for much more intimate contact. She did not want to relent to his pleading, but she only had one other friend, also a boy, and she despaired that if she declined the boy's pleadings, he would revile her and tell her other friend of this disappointment, casting Inga out of their priorities and then leaving her friendless altogether. On the 7th occasion, where the boy begged that she let him grope her, Inga cried out,
"No, I hate you, and I never want to see you again."
The boy burst into tears and fled. In the years that followed, they would silently catch sight of one another in the halls of their school. She would gawk at his new girlfriend and fume jealously, wishing he would concede.
"Inga, it's you who I love."
One day, she and he crossed paths at an outdoor shopping center. On impulse, she threw him a hug, and they stood in that embrace for several minutes. Afterward, they stood and resumed their diverging paths. In that entire duration, not a single word traveled between them. She told me that that was the last interaction she had with him. She attributed her fear of men and rape to these events. But, to me, this didn't explain the fixation on child molesters in particular. Furthermore, Inga soon admitted that when she was small, years prior to the incident with the boy, she had already come to loathe her own femininity. She was not a tween when she concluded that female anatomy, it was sickening, rendering her weak and vulnerable to predation by males.
My unwillingness, Inga sobbed, to get my friend to back off much sooner hurt my self-image. I didn't respect myself.
She grew numb, and to feel anything again, she resorted to slashing her wrists with a blade several times a day. This was her routine back in Tromsø. Inga kept making the wounds more and more obvious, and for a long period, those around the neighborhood conducted themselves as if they didn't even notice. She was of two minds in this predicament. On the one hand, she imparted, she was disturbed that people didn't speak up to help her. On the other hand, she continued, it was good that people around her were like this because it made it convenient for her to continue the self-cutting and to escalate the damage. Around this same phase in her life, Inga attended anonymous internet message boards and announced her plans to kill herself. It took strangers on the forums to talk her out of it. For more than 10 years, she desired to be dead. Unequivocally, she did not covet some afterlife where she ascended to some heavenly plane. On the contrary, she hoped that her death would amount to the absolute extinguishing of her consciousness, that she would return to the same absolute nothingness that was there for her prior to her embryonic conception. She wanted to lose every memory of her experiences, and then undergo no more sensations, to cease to be. Ultimately, though, a schoolmate caught her as she was self-cutting, and, unlike the others, this one notified the principal. Officials had her consult a mental health professional, but it was mostly for self-cutting, not as much for her other personal issues. And once the self-cutting stopped, the adults were satisfied and let Inga terminate mental health treatment around 2007. Inga gazed musingly into space and acknowledged to me that she could not have braved